What's going on, everybody? It's Bromley, and today I'm going to do something I haven't yet done. I am going to do a technical review of some of my forum members' lifts. I asked them a few weeks ago to submit under a question and answer thread videos that they wanted me to look at and critique to see if we can troubleshoot, tighten up their technique, find out where they might be leaving some pounds on the bar. So let's get into it. So we got Dylan says, "Hey folks, I'm an Olympic weightlifter delving into the world of Strongman." That's great. Wanted to show this top set at 200 kilograms. That is 440 freedom units for those of you that are not versed in the metric system, because it's definitely ugly but shows my weaknesses well. I can rep out submaximal work all day but break down above certain percentages, especially for deadlifts since I'm so unpracticed. Now that's a big thing with deadlifts, is that you might find under a certain threshold, you feel good, you can push the envelope, you can maintain position, and then once you get up to a certain weight, things inexplicably break down. And the reason for that is that the deadlift is one of the most, I would say, overall disadvantaged movements, and it requires cooperation from every single link in your chain. If you have some weakness along the chain that impacts stability, then you get this cascade effect once the weight gets to the point where that weakness is exploited. So you might very well find that your legs and hips can move 600 pounds, but your upper back or your midsection can only brace 5. Well, anything under 500 might go off like a charm, and then once you get to that threshold, everything falls apart. So that's a very normal thing. Let's get into Dylan's lift. All right, a little bit of a hitch, not bad. So we'll see, I want to see him set up. So right here at the setup. So right here, so we're looking like, I feel for this guy, looks like a bit of length in his torso. You see how far back his butt is, and his shoulders are still a bit over his knees. So that's a good example that this, the torso, bracing the torso is very likely going to be a limiting factor. You have to have your midsection and upper back disproportionately strong, and it can get really tricky trying to find out where your exact sweet spot is at the start, because if your torso, the muscles that support your spine, are extremely strong, you got a lot of play in the joints. You can get away with a ton. But if they're not quite and you're a little bit leverage disadvantaged, you might feel like you have to sit all the way back or get a lot more upright in order to get off a good rep, but then that really puts your hips and legs in an awkward position. So seeing this pull, he's got his head down here, so he's going for that neutral neck, neutral spine all the way through. Okay, so right there, you see pushes, first thing that happens, hips come up right here, and now you're seeing, this is no bueno, right? You're seeing the bar coming off the ground. At this point, this is almost a true stiff-legged deadlift. He's got a little bit of bend in his knees, but his back is almost parallel to the ground. I think it is parallel to the ground. And if that's how you pull from it, it's almost better to start in that position. All in all, long term, that might not be what you aim for. That might not be the best position to set yourself up for several years out. But for now, it almost seems like it would be better to start in that position than start with a lot of leg drive and then let your hips ride up, because your back's going from or a bit more advantage to a place that's really disadvantaged, and then you have to recover. And I think we're going to see a little more give. Not much. Actually, that's not quite bad. I'm not super concerned with that. That's within, I would say that's within the safe zone, provided that isn't a range that specifically gives you issues. Now, right here, that's where you see it, that hitch. Now, I'm a fan of a hitch. In certain scenarios, I hitched a lot when I started Strongman, and what I found is that getting my hitch quick, let me go back to that right now. So he's pitched over. Once the bar gets above the knee, he sits his hips back and immediately gets upright, because now the knees aren't in the way. The knees can just go forward and you can get upright, infinitely more advantaged, more mechanically strong. So that's where that advantage comes from. And that wouldn't count in powerlifting, but who the hell cares if you're not a powerlifter? What I found is that years of doing that actually taught me to get my hips through quick. So even when I had to kind of anchor my knees in place, I was still able to execute really fast lockouts. And this is actually something, and I'll show a video of one of my other lifters. This is something I try to cue in other people, because if you are a power lifter and you're having trouble with your lockout, a lot of times it's because you never got comfortable dragging the bar back and bringing your hips forward into the bar. So right there, and then now he just stands up. It's like almost like a squat movement at that point. So the lockout looks good. Troubleshooting this, I would do a couple things. One, I would have this starting position. I would have the knees back a little bit more. And I would have the hips start a little bit higher. Now, if you have the knees back, that's going to shift your weight this way. And then once your weight gets shifted back, you'll be a little bit more upright. It'll get your shoulders a little bit more behind the bar. Now, the sensation, and I've done this before too, where I get in a position where I feel like I'm almost going to fall backwards if I let go of the bar. And what that does is that really helps out the muscles that support your spine, because you're keeping the bar as close to your center of mass as possible and as close to your hips as possible. And I find that to be a much stronger position. So given that I have these issues, let's consult. I'm using myself ultimately as a example, but that's because specifically I've had those issues before. So this is about where my deadlift first started to click. We'll go to, it's my first 700-pound pull right here. So right there. Now you see that my shoulders are still a little over my knees, and I'm sitting way back. I think my femurs are a little shorter than this guy, but I definitely have the long torso issue. And what I got in the habit of doing is setting my torso a little more upright, having my shins a little more vertical. So I had this nice straight line path. And then what I would basically do is do a leg press. You know, a leg press is also called a hip sled, because it doesn't feel like a squat. It very much, you feel it in your hips and your ass. And that's what I would go for. So in that position, the push, I felt it in my hips, and that primed me for that extension. So immediately when that bar got over my knees, right there, and this is where my history of hitching comes into play, you see I just drag it back. So that probably would have counted in a powerlifting meet. You see how close that bar stays. And I wear long shorts for a reason, so there's no friction. That bar just slides right up my legs. And that's something that I try to replicate. So this is the double. If I can do 1 rep, I can do like 4 more. So I decided to go for a double. And at the time, this is the most weight I had ever deadlifted. So knees a bit back, not completely vertical, but a bit back. I'm loaded well into my hips. Hip drive right there. I'm maintaining the same angle. Now, this is something that I drill a lot, because if I can maintain the same angle, by the time I get to my knee, I'm going to position to lock out immensely faster. Where Dylan here, if we watch, see, he gets pitched over and he has to get erect while the bar's still in front of his knees. That takes a lot of effort. That actually suggests a lot of hamstring strength and a bit of upper back strength to be able to get erect between like right here. Man, that's a good amount. So from the time the bar's right here to the time it's to his knee, he's having to get upright, and the bar's not getting any closer to him because the knees are in the way. And you can see how eager he is to get his knees forward right there. Now, that suggests very strong hamstrings and an upper back that's doing its job pretty well. I would find a way to start with your hips a little higher, and you should be able to have a little bit more of an upright position if you could rock your weight back at the start instead of being way over the bar. I think, honestly, that's what's killing you more than anything, is starting out way over the bar. So push the knees back. You'll find you'll be able to roll that bar back an extra 1 or 2 inches. The leverage difference is going to be massive. So this is a client of mine, Joel, and I want to use him as an example because he's a powerlifter. He has a very good sumo deadlift, and it led his conventional by 80 or 90 pounds, which already led his squat by a substantial amount. So I really wanted to round this out. So I've been having him do a lot of conventional work before we transition back to sumo. And one of the things, and sumo lifters have trouble with lockout as well because the positioning is a little weird. The hands can get in the way. Getting your hips through is a little less straightforward. So I see this as Joel does conventional. He's extremely strong off the ground, but I've been trying to cue him to do the same thing. So I want you to see what he does with his lockout in an effort to get that clean powerlifting legal lockout in. So you see him get his hands, head up, very fast. And he's doing a shit ton of reps because That's what I programmed for him. And you're going to see as he gets to the end, you see very fast to the knee. And then watch, it's almost as his knees go back and the bar doesn't quite stay glued. It doesn't quite stay glued to the thighs, because what I want to see is that bar drag back, almost like you're going to hitch, just without pushing the knees forward. You're pushing the hips into the bar. So the bar drags back, the hips get shoved forward so they come in to meet each other. That's the most efficient thing. I also don't like that he's wearing short shorts. Lovely as his thighs are, that creates a ton of unnecessary friction. And he actually has pretty developed quads, so they push out and it creates a lot more friction. Sweats, baby powder, basketball shorts, any of that causes the bar to just glide up as opposed to getting stuck on your skin. So that actually might be a tactic that some guys end up doing, kind of keeping the knees back a little bit to reduce friction against your quads. So watch here as Joel locks out. You see, once he gets right above the knee, he's going to get a little stutter. It was right there. It was very subtle. And that little stutter is kind of leaping the bar over the knee to the quad and focusing more on the upper back coming back as opposed to the actual hips coming through. So if you see where you're that far from lockout and the shoulders are going through all this motion, but you really need just this little bit of motion from the hip. You just need a boot in your ass to kick your hips forward. If that's all you need, you're putting effort in the wrong place. It's not getting your shoulders back through this monumental effort. It's not up, 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 and back. It's that little push to just get the hips forward. So that's where you squeeze your ass, the hips go forward, the bar comes back. That's what we're looking for. All right, let's hit another one. Got a lot of deadlift checks here. I have a feeling it's going to be predominantly deadlift checks until I get another book out. Maybe after I publish Superior Squat, we'll get some squat videos. So here we got Josh Horton. Short and polite. I like it, Josh. Thank you. I would appreciate a form check if you have the time. For you, I have the time. $5.50 for a dub. Not too shabby. Let's see it. All right, loading in. Not bad. It's got a springy bar. He's loading in. I think it's a good setup. Looks like the bar's right over the midfoot, which that's just an observation. I think that's one of the most overblown cues in all of lifting culture. Knees come forward, butt comes down. So here you see, looks like, I'm going to say arms are a little short. Look at how compact Josh is right here. Look at that steep hip angle. He's a bit upright in that he's not completely parallel. His back isn't completely parallel to the ground. This little bit of uprightness for this guy, because I can tell he's got short legs. Ooh, I feel your pain, Josh. I feel your pain. But he's squeezed in tight. He's compact. And it almost looks like his arms are a little bent too. And in doing this pump, he gets a big drive. So for a guy like this, and I think I'm more built like this guy than I was like Dylan. I can attest to the bottom position being extraordinarily uncomfortable. I mean, look how compressed he is. Does this look fun to anybody? Does this look comfortable? How long could any of you hang out in this position with all this pressure, especially considering he's a bigger guy? In a squat, that probably feels great. In a deadlift, that feels horrible. And as he hits into it, good leg drive. Okay, I like that yank. He does keep his arms a little bit bent, and he does a little bit of a yank. I know people that do that. I don't know if that's to exploit the whip in the bar so that you're already engaging momentum through the legs and hips as your arms take slack out. So you already have momentum, and then you're taking the slack out, and then you're taking the full weight off the ground. So there's kind of this order of operation. There might be something to that. Some Olympic lifters will do that. If you see Mikhail Kokolaev deadlift, he squats all the way down with his arms bent and then straightens them as he comes up with the bar, and he does it hook grip and the whole 9 yards. Pulled 900 pounds like that in a powerlifting meet, I believe. So he hits into the bar, comes up. Now that's kind of the lockout I'm talking about. Now the knees look like they lock out prematurely, and I think that's one of the biggest problems there. From the start, let me see. Was he pumping? Pump. No, he just kind of sat down. Okay, so that's not quite the pump. So he takes his hands, he loads in, Okay, so right there, the first thing I'm going to critique is your start. The way you get to the bar, I want to see right there. Come on, work. Right there. I want to see as your hips come down, I want to see that tension get taken out of the bar. So I do want those arms straight. I know some people, that's almost like a relaxed, straight down, compressed down into the bar. He's not back. He hasn't pulled all the tension out. In fact, the bar looks pretty straight right there. And then just kind of smacks into it right there. Now, it looks like dude's got a strong back because he can handle it and he gets good leg drive and he clears the knee. I'm going to tell you, you're going to get a lot more pop if you can get your hands in. Take your breath right here. Right when your butt's in the air, take a breath. Sit back. Build the tension up. Arms should be straight. That bar should be bending already. So see where his hands are? On a bar like this, if he's sitting back with his arms straight and he's pulled tension out of the bar is going to be about an inch, inch and a half higher. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a huge difference mechanically. So instead of whipping into it and giving this big shock to your upper back, it's going to be a bit more controlled, but you'll get a much more efficient hit from your glutes and your quadriceps. You'll feel where the tension is. Your start will be more efficient, more predictable, and your weight will be back. A guy with a build like this shouldn't be just slumped over the bar. You should have everything back, hips back, shins a little straighter, head up a little more. That'll make you more upright. You'll be amazed at how much that'll help your pull. If you can sit back, get a little more upright. Midsection, upper back are now advantage. They don't get so gassed from each rep. That'll be a game changer. And I'm guessing your hit off the ground will be as good, if not stronger. That's what I'm guessing. So assuming you do that, so right here, so you'll be leaping up to your knee because you got pretty strong yank off the floor. Right here, this is what I was talking about. I want to see this boot right here kicking your ass forward. And I want to see that bar coming back at an angle, staying glued to your legs. I also fucking hate knee sleeves. Pardon my French. Knee sleeves on a deadlift, it's just an insane amount of friction. It doesn't help you. Most people don't have knee problems on a pull. Squatting, I kind of understand, but they don't add anything to the lift, but it's this huge obstacle. I've seen a lot of guys get deadlifts hung up on their knee sleeves. But right there, that bar should just be coming straight back, and it does. He gets it over. And right there, look at the shoulders. Well, let's do that again. So right there, the lift should be over. The lift should be over right there. And that little hitch, that little kick in, that's kind of inefficient. It's kind of ugly. I mean, it's smooth. So what I'm seeing the knees get pushed back to lock the weight out. And that's part of it. The knees and hips should be working in conjunction. It's like a kettlebell swing. As you come up, you get into that plank stance where the knees and hips snap to lock out together. So they should be happening at the same time. I get the feeling that the knees going back are leading the lockout, and that's really ugly. That's, if anything, the hips should be leading the knees by a little bit, because getting the hips forward is exponentially more important and more, it's bigger priority. So right there, those hips should be just gliding. Right as they lock out, I should see the knees. And when that happens, you don't get that jerk, because it looks like you snap to lockout, but that's not quite pretty. Let's see what the second rep looks like. Same thing, you come down, yank. Okay, that was actually smoother. I like the second rep a little better on the lockout. It was just slower because you were fatigued. So what I would do if I were you is I would just prioritize. I might almost practice on your back down sets doing a quick hitch, like I talked about. Getting your knees forward, feeling what it's like to get upright and slide your hips through. Doesn't work well unless it's quick. You have to do it fast. That's the most important thing, because you want that hip speed to transition once you anchor your knee into a clean powerlifting legal lockout. So I would almost tell you to take some time with lighter weights. Practice yanking that bar up above your knee, pushing your knee forward, and then feeling how quick your knees can snap, or your hips, can snap to lockout. And then eventually transitioning back. And you should only do that as a supplementary exercise. Don't do all your reps like that. But that's what you're missing, I think. If you get the setup a little bit better, you'll be nastier off the ground. You're already very good off the ground. But getting the lockout, getting the hips in quicker, It's just practice. You just need to feel what it's like to squeeze your ass at the top, to have that lead the movement. And once you do that, it'll be game over. Your deadlifts will blow up. I mean, you can do rack pulls, but this isn't like a weight issue or like getting used to loading a specific range. This is a coordination issue. And you fix those by building receptivity. And that's an entirely different thing. You have to build receptivity in those muscles. So anything that will fry your ass, basically, anything that'll squeeze your glute. Warm up with single leg glute bridges. Feel what it's like to push your hips all the way forward and squeeze. If you've ever done strongman events, loading for reps, do like a keg load over a bar. Do a 150 or 200 pound keg, pull it on the same side lengthwise into your lap and roll it up as you push it over a yoke bar. And do that for reps. You'll feel your ass squeeze. You need to do things where you have to shove your hips forward under a load explosively, and eventually that'll click. So I think that's actually a pretty small hurdle you have to climb. Going in at Jenkins, novice lifter, lifting for about a year. Started deadlifting about 6 months ago, so we got a newbie. 8 reps at 265. Guys, that's how quick strength builds when you're new, as long as you're being consistent. That's linear progression strength right there. Those type of intermediate numbers should come very quick. If you've been doing it for a year or more and you're not seeing these numbers, you got to revisit your commitment, your consistency, and see where you're losing ground. Biggest question is figuring out breathing. I've been advised to breathe at the bottom instead of the top, but haven't deadlifted since this video to try that. Thank you. Okay, let's see, bud. Looks pretty good. It's hard to see from the angle because the clips or the weight, the plates actually block so much. So he's just grinding them out. All right. Let's start with the first one. He was advised to breathe at the bottom. That makes no sense on a touch and go deadlift. So I'm going to assume whoever gave him that advice told him to do that for paused reps or dead stop reps. That's still terrible advice. The most disadvantaged part, the part that requires the hardest brace, is at the bottom when your midsection is disadvantaged because you're bent over more, your hips are back, right? And that's where you're breathing, you're moving your ribs, everything's destabilized. So if you're breathing at the bottom, that's the most disadvantaged position. That's where you lose tension. Even on dead stop reps, you maintain stretch reflex for a few seconds, 3-4 seconds. Stretch reflex hangs around for a while. So what I got in the habit of doing, let's go back. One of my better deadlift performances was at the Arnold that I did. When did I do the Arnold? 2000, it was beginning of COVID, 2020. And that was one of the best deadlift performances I ever had. I ended up tying for second. So this was a 625 axle for 3 into a 655 deadlift for 3 with a regular bar. And notice what I do here. I deadlift at the top. That's where I take my breath. I tighten everything up. I do a controlled descent so that I hit the ground in the exact position I'm pulling from. Same position I was telling Josh to get into, where I push my hips back, stay a little more upright. Works for guys built like us. That won't work for everybody. Keep that in mind. But my goal is to set up so I can pause, because I have to wait for the judge command. I have to pause, but I want to utilize stretch reflex. And you don't do that if you let yourself go slack. If you do that shit where you start pumping your hips again, that's great for a 1 rep max. It's horrible for reps. Wastes too much energy. So this is a better approach. Come down under control. Wait for it. Boom. Breath comes at the top. Now you're going to see this in just a second. This was the best plate thing I think I ever did. I tied for second in this event in a sea of there were a couple of 800-pound deadlifters there. There were very strong dudes. Counted to 20, went for it because I had to fill out the minute, and I knew I could get 1. If I could get 1, I could get 3. I knew that. And it was using this technique on reps. So I get set, leg drive, come up, big breath at the top, back up. There you go. Right there. And that's how I got 3 solid reps, nice and upright as I can get, hips back. Breathing at the bottom is a terrible idea. Now, only thing I can think of is if, I don't know, you're in a grinder and you're legitimately taking like 5 or 6 seconds at the bottom, but I don't even think you should be doing that in your training. I think that's a bad idea. So on reps linked together like this, get your air at the top. It's you stand up, exhale. Every time you get above your knee, I like to exhale. Quick breath. You might even get 1 or 2 short ones, and then tense up and go through the descent. So that's really the best advice I can give. Your pull actually doesn't look very bad, especially for a novice, a guy who hasn't been lifting very long. Hips dropping back to the start. Okay. Arms are straight, tension out of the bar. That's actually pretty good. I like where your shoulders are relative to your knees. I can't really see, but it looks like your shins are pretty vertical. A lot of these guys asking for form checks, nice stocky builds. So I relate to a lot. I'm waiting for a guy built like a crane, and then I can give some real insight there. So look at this hip angle. That's actually a pretty nice hip angle. It's not as open as somebody who's a really advantaged puller with really long arms, but the fact that you're upright, easier time bracing here, a lot more efficient, less taxation on your upper back and midsection for each rep that you do. Sets you up for a good amount of leg drive. If you're a strong squatter, and this type of lifter wants to be a strong squatter. So you get good leg drive off the start. Over the knee, hips through. Lockout look pretty smooth. I like that, but I don't have a lot of comments for you. Breath at the top, down. That's perfect. That's really good. And honestly, I don't have an opinion about touch and go reps. For high rep deads, they're fine. If you're doing most of your rep work touch and go, eventually over time you'll become an artist, a touch and go artist, and your rep capacity will way outpace your ability to pull from the ground. So once you're in lower rep ranges, I do recommend doing dead stop because that will add something to your 1 rep max. But high rep stuff, pull away. That will overload your ass and your hips like nothing else. If you're looking to fry your glutes, do a high rep 10 plus rep set with touch and go reps, and you'll feel your ass scream, especially if you're hitting that lockout like I told you to. You're going to feel your ass scream like you never have before. Oh, Daniel Earp. All right, Patreon member. Gotta give Danny a go. 2 singles done after my working sets. RPE 8.5. Would you agree with RPE? Also, any technique critique is welcome. All right, RPE, very challenging to rate. I can't tell you an RPE by looking at you unless I've worked with you for a while or I know where you typically fail. So that is a lot slower. If I pull a rep that slow, that's an RPE 9 or 10 for me. I just know that. And part of that's conditioning. I always keep my reps fast. And part of that's because I bias on keeping the weight down because of history of injury. That's my own personal bias for a lot of reasons. And that actually means I need to spend more time grinding if I really want to flesh out true 1 rep max capacity. I don't really doubt that he could have done a couple of reps there. It was a little slow, but it was even the whole way through. 8.5, that means 1, maybe 2 reps in the tank. You know, if you're going off of that recommendation for RPE, it might have felt harder just being under tension for a long time. If your blood vessels are bursting and your eyeballs feel like they're going to pop out, it might feel harder. But that doesn't necessarily mean the RPE is much higher. It's really a matter of what was that relative to your maximum ability. So yeah, I'd say that's 8.5. As far as technical cues, so he's got his mixed grip. So here he's kind of, it looks like he's trying to build a lot of compression. Looks like he's trying to mirror Konstantinov's setup. The way knees are a little forward, butt back, squatted, low-ish, with the lumbar spine suggesting this angle, suggesting a pretty upright position, but rounding substantially through the mid-back all the way to head down. So that's going to allow the shoulders to hang lower, so your lats right here are nice and spread open. That gives you a good leverage advantage. I actually like that as a technique for guys that are suited to it. And couple breaths and a yank. So that's the only thing I don't like. Really don't like when lifters hang out at the bottom. You expend a ton of energy. Worse than that your psychology absolutely screws you over. That's the worst part. And you see it here. You see the hesitation. If you're one of these lifters, your number one goal with training is to get the hell rid of that hesitation. And you do that by drilling where your starting position is and making sure that you can find it and yank the bar on a timer. So one cue that I'll give to people that have a problem with that is I'll say, once you grip the bar, you only have one breath. You're not allowed to take more than one breath. One breath, make it count. So if they panic and take a second breath, you know they lost. If they sit down there and they wiggle for a bit, you know they screwed up. It's an easy way to try and regulate that time frame. So they get in the habit of getting their ritual, getting where they feel solid, getting into position. Okay, I'm in position. One deep breath, tighten up, go. You don't have the option to do anything else. So I don't really have a technical critique. I think this could potentially be a very strong pulling position for you. But I would say don't get your hands on the bar and fuck around for 5 or 10 seconds. I would say get your hands on the bar, take a breath, lock everything down, and pull. I also, in this position, I don't know. I go back and forth on the yank. I know some people do it with a ton of success. I feel like for majority of people, it's going to be a harder hit on your supportive muscles, and that's going to make it a bigger training stress. So even if weight moves pretty well, all of your reps, all of the volume you're doing, I think your upper back would actually grow more. Your midsection would get stronger, and you would be able to accommodate a lot more work if you weren't doing this big hit. If you were practicing getting tight, pulling the slack out, and then doing an aggressive pull, but not doing this herky-jerky snap into the bar. That's how you get out of position. That's how the bar drifts in front of you. More importantly, we're talking about psychology. That's how you make your pulling really inconsistent. Some of the best deadlifters of all time, not all of them, but some of them, were almost like forklifts off the bottom. Look at Zadrunas pull. And that's, I could say, okay, he's a genetic freak. He's one of the best strongmen of all time. Sure, he pulled that way. You don't see a lot of guys go over 900 pounds with a huge yank. Because again, inconsistency, torn biceps, those are all things you got to worry about. Many of them have conditioned themselves to demonstrate control off the ground and then accelerate evenly over time. So that's how I think about it. Do a substantial effort to break the bar, but do so under control after you've taken the tension out, and then practice accelerating up over your knee to where you are mechanically the strongest. Lockout looks pretty good. Okay, upper back. There you go. Lockout is primarily in the shoulders. That's a big problem here. So look, coming up, 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 right here. Okay, right here, look at the angle in his hip. That's almost locked out. That's almost locked out. You just need that boot in your butt right here. Now look how far back his shoulders travel. Here to here. All that unnecessary movement leans way back. Now I know you might be thinking exaggerate it to put an exclamation point on it and make your lockout that much stronger. Actually, it's just the opposite. You're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on up and then getting the shoulders back. That has to happen in conjunction with the hips. But especially starting off with the Konstantinov's hang, one of the benefits of that is that the bar hangs lower, so you should be able to sneak your hips in faster. So I actually like to think of the shoulders getting the least amount of distance back that they actually need to. That's one thing I like to think of, is I would actually tell you to stand vertical, aim for vertical, chin still tucked down, back still rounded. That flies. If the hips are forward, that counts. Less effort, less energy, easier to conceptualize. That's the fixture lockout. So on that note, let's see what Konstantinov's looked like. Let's see what his lockout was like. It's a deadlift compilation. Yeah, I don't have time for all that. All right. Here we go. Big Konstantinov's pull. So you see head tucked down. The angle of the lumbar spine suggests a much more upright position, but he gets a good Ninja Turtle tuck. All this is flared open, which allows him to hang the bar a little bit lower. Huge leverage advantage. And this thickens out over time. This is a byproduct of training. So remember, you get good at how you train, right? it's not just that there's one optimal position. The position you decide to get into will have different implications for what needs to be developed more or less. Some of it will come out in the wash. Some of it may actually be vital regardless of what you do. But see, everything's pushed forward. He's a little turtled over the bar. And then hits, and that's pretty explosive. I know I'm telling you to do this controlled lift, but look at the rest of his body. Look at his arms and his torso when he hits into that bar. He's acting on that bar. It's not acting on him. So you don't see the snap. You don't see the snap that you do when these smaller lifters try to mimic it. Now look at his hip action. Look how quickly, once that bar gets over his knees, his hips just sneak in. He's not trying to do this big dramatic roll the shoulders back. The way those clowns that do those 800-pound shrugs at LA Fitness where they're just moving their shoulders back and not elevating the weight. So right here, hips through. And see that action, how that all happened at once? That's locked out, and the shoulders just came right back. They happened together. The hips led the shoulders, not the other way around. Let's see if we can find something. Put some weight on it, guy. Come on. See how aggressive that forward hip push is at the lockout? That's almost locked out. Shit, I know judges that would give that to him. Hips come in, and it's done. It's not in the shoulders. It's in the hips. Let's get this last deadlift one out. Jake Jones, last one of the day. You snuck it in. All right, scene change. I had the camera die and it was late at night, so it is very early in the morning. Let's go ahead and finish this out. I got one more deadlift video to review. This one comes from Jake Jones. Short and sweet. Form check, please. Yes, sir. You got it, Jake. So let's see. I'm noticing right off the bat, Jake's got a wider stance. That works really well for some people. Not necessarily for everybody. You think of some of the monster strongman, the guys that are super tall, really big frames, and it seems to be that these guys get a lot of hip drive. The way you think of a leg press, they call it a hip sled, right? Because a lot of what you feel, it's not necessarily just in your quads. It's in your ass, it's in your hips, and you get this big hip push. So when you get kind of a wider base, you can facilitate that a little more. So Shaw and Pritchett, Thor kind of will deadlift this way. Now this looks like, it doesn't look like a slight man, but not quite as built to the extreme as these larger human beings are. Feet pretty wide apart, so that's going to be a very leg press type movement. So we're seeing right now. Now watch this before. Jake goes double overhand, and see how he grabs it really quick like that. See that again. So I like that. I like the dive bomb approach. Double overhand, I've gotten after clients over this before too, that think they're cheating if they move to a mixed grip or if they use straps or if they hook or whatever else. Double overhand, I'll only do in like RDLs or on like the first one or two warm-up sets. After that, you got to practice how you play. And whether that's practicing getting your straps in or whether that's practicing your mixed grip, especially if you pull mixed grip, every single rep should be mixed grip because you have to condition not just the movement pattern, but the tendons have to get used to it. Your symmetry has to change through your upper body. That's not something you save for the last minute. If you want to train your grip, train your grip. But when you deadlift, you got to practice how you play. So I'm not a big fan of the double over. I do like that he gets down to business. He gets to the bar quick, 1-2 pulls. That's how I got over my fear of pulling off the ground. For a long time, I said I was weak off the ground, and I was, but it wasn't because I was weak. It was because I was afraid. And doing the dive bomb approach where I get in front of the bar, get my feet set, run through all my cues, top to bottom, arms up, deep breath, 1-2 pull, and it eliminated the fear, and I found I was much more explosive. You get a bit of stretch reflex that way when you come down to the bar and then pop up. So I like the aggression. Now let's see it. All right, they're really fast off the ground. This is pretty lightweight for Jake. And right here, you see how bent over he is? Back's 45-degree angle. Knees are already pretty close to lockout. So if you notice the knee angle relative to the hip angle, that means I want to see for lockout the knees stay in this position, and I don't want to see them extend until the last moment where the hips come all the way through. So right now, the hips seem to be coming through. But remember, we don't want to do what we've seen before, where we see the bar kind of leap straight up and out in front, and the hips kind of take this long journey as the shoulders come way back. I want to see that bar ramp straight back, and I want the hips coming forward to meet it. And when you do it right, you're not thinking about pulling the bar up. You're thinking about hips forward, bar coming in to meet the hips. And that's where you're going to get the most efficient stroke. And when you do it right, you're going to feel it. It's going to feel so much more efficient. So right here, okay, not bad. A little more shoulder exaggeration than I like to see. And when the weight's light, that's how that habit gets reinforced, because you're trying to put an exclamation point on it. I don't care about that. I want to see, if anything, I want to see you standing straight up and down. I want to see almost a plank position. The goal is not to get the bar higher. You got to remember that. The goal is not to get the bar higher. The goal is to get your hips into the bar. It's night and day in practice. So that's my only real critique. Starting position looks good. I just see a little bit of shoulder and upper back exaggeration, and that might be the angle. I don't know that it's that pronounced. It looks like this slightly wider. It looks like it's just a little out of shoulder width. Maybe not. Maybe that's a camera angle too. It doesn't look like an awkward setup to me. And again, knees and hips, that's all in his build. I don't see any reason to suggest that his feet should come any closer or his hands should come any closer. He might be able to bring his hands in a little bit. I'm seeing how much of the knurling is exposed. So you could foreseeably get a half inch or inch of range if the feet and hands came in a little bit. But at the end of the day, how important is that? You get good at how you train, and whatever he's losing there, he might be making up in a little more hip power. So I don't really have an issue. Similarly, and notice I'm getting all the technical video review requests from guys that don't have really advantaged setups. I'm not seeing guys with open knees and open hips at the start. These guys don't look like knuckle draggers. Let's look where he locks the bar out. He's probably resetting his grip more than anything. The weight doesn't look heavy for the rest of his body. See right there. You see the bar cradling his junk right there. So that actually shows a good hang. If this gentleman were to exaggerate posture and pull his shoulders back and kind of stand erect, with an empty bar, the bar probably clears his junk. So you're looking at well above the midway point of his thighs. So what does that translate to when he's on the ground? Look at that. Look how steep that angle is. This guy is going to need strong hamstrings, strong ass, and strong upper back to compensate for this. So upper back and midsection to support you with maximal loads when you're in this bent over position. I mean, that's why you do RDLs. Tempo, time, control in this bent over position. It insulates you to it. And then as you bend over, as you get in a position with these heavier weights, it's not such a big hit because you're used to it. So there are better and worse positions to be in, and obviously it's more optimal if you're a little more upright, hips and knees a little more open. Yeah, you can move more weight, but the trade-off is you won't develop the same amount of mass and strength. So it's a trade-off. You can always reinforce yourself. You can always pad yourself around the movement pattern and the positioning that you set up in. So this guy just needs strong legs. He needs to be a big squatter. I recommend you do a ton of squatting, box squats, strict solid box squats with a good pause without rocking. That helps. Pause squats are great. Front squats might even be beneficial. Anything that conditions that drive, pin squats, dead stop stuff. You get in the theme here. But right here, let's see. Yeah, so that first movement, look at that, from here to here. That's just a leg press. And good job, by the way. He keeps his back angle the same. The hips don't shoot up first. And you see him actually start to get erect. So as he's pushing. Let's see, from the ground to the knee. right there. See how erect he got in that short period of time? And now the bar's over his knees. And I just want to see right there. It looks like, see, the knees are almost already locked, and he still has all this real estate to cover. So I'd like to see the hips slide through first. And that takes practice. Drill the shit out of that. Pull the bar back. But not bad. Not bad. I think that's a solid deadlift foundation. It's going to be a little more cumbersome. But the trade-off is, even if you think you're not able to lift as much weight as some of the other guys, you can. Just how much you're willing to dedicate to getting your setup good. It's a matter of how much time you spend making sure you don't have any weaknesses that can be exploited. As I talked about, load can exploit one weak link in the chain. Well, the more cumbersome your deadlift is, the more easily that point is going to be exploited, if that makes sense. But no, Jake, I like your setup. I think it suits you. You look pretty efficient. Again, I think the lockout can be made a little bit more smooth, exaggerated a little bit more with the hips as opposed to the shoulders. But you do a good job getting the bar to your knee. It's a leg press, and you actually do a good job of bringing yourself into that extension, because when the bar's at the knee, the more upright you are, the faster the hips come through. So that's what you want to shoot for. And when you go fast, if you're a dive bomb puller like that, those movements bleed together. The push through the floor to the hip extension, to the shoulders coming back and hips coming forward. So when you do it really quickly, they have to be in sync. But that's not bad. I like that. So that's the deadlift form checks for today. If you do have form check videos you want, I plan on doing this in the future. Benching, squatting, strongman events, whatever you want. From here on out, I'm probably going to be just taking them from YouTube members and from the Patreon page. I still take a lot of questions from the Base Strength Facebook group. That is absolutely free, so go ahead and check that out. But thanks so much for stopping by today, guys. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.